Good afternoon and welcome to the February meeting of the Design Development Review Commission. The commission is made up of volunteers with expertise or interest in historic preservation and design. We generally meet on the second Thursday of the month to review cases. The staff of the commission is Amy Moore and normally Lucinda Stadler, but that's not Lucinda. Please feel free to ask them any questions you may have about these proceedings. The meeting generally proceeds with the staff calling the case and describing it. The applicant may also come forward afterward to add to the basic description of the request if necessary. If so, please try to keep your presentation to less than 10 minutes. The commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask questions. After this period, I will then ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak for or against the proposal. If there is, the applicant will have an opportunity to respond. In most of the cases, we will make a decision this afternoon after all information has been presented. If your case is denied or if you feel that our decision was made in error, you or anyone withstanding will have the opportunity to appeal it within 30 days of the decision. If you plan to speak about a specific project, you must have signed in. The sheet is at the back of the room as you came in, and it will also, if you didn't do it, there should be one up on the podium after that. If you plan to speak during the proceeding, I need for you to stand at this point so that I can administer an oath to everyone who plans to speak or respond. So anyone who plans to speak or respond, please stand. Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Do you affirm to tell the truth in these proceedings? Okay, thank you. I'm going ahead and instruct the staff to call the roll. Amy.
Ms. Wisnett?
Present.
Ms. Great?
Present.
Mr. Wynn?
Present.
Mr. Powell?
Present.
Mr. Gressett?
Present.
Mr. Marshall?
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Before we get onto the agenda, I'd like to take a moment to pause and remember Doris Hildebrand, who was a member of the commission who passed away in the past couple of weeks. Ms. Hildebrand was the president of the Waverly Neighborhood Association and was part of this commission for approximately the last 6 years, and we'd like to have a moment of silence in her memory. Thank you. Again, Ms. Hildebrand will be deeply missed, and we wanted to recognize her work on this commission. Is there anyone else on the commission who'd like to say anything regarding Ms. Hildebrand? If not, again, I think we all, will miss her presence here. Does the agenda still stand?
We've had a few changes since publication. 2216 Wallace Street, which was a request for a certificate of design approval for a new outbuilding in the Cottontown, Architectural Conservation District, has been withdrawn. And also 1600 Main Street, which is the Barry's building, which is a request for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill and exterior changes, has been moved to the consent agenda.
Okay.
With your approval.
All right, thank you. And so that brings up the consent agenda. The consent agenda has been implemented to streamline our proceedings and consists of projects that have been found to fully meet the requirements of the guidelines. At this time, Amy, would you read the list of items on the consent agenda?
Certainly. I might just go ahead and preface this by saying these are all cases for preliminary certification for the Bailey Bill, as well as some with exterior changes. And the first one is 2219 Senate Street. This is in the Old Chandon Lower Waverly Protection Area A. 2512 Cypress Street, which is also in the Old Chandon Lower Waverly Protection Area A. 1401 Laurel Street is an individual landmark. 113 Lincoln Street is in the Whaley Street Historic District. 1804 Green Street is in the University Hill Architectural Conservation District. And of course, 1600 Main Street, Barry's building, is a National Register structure in the new National Register neighborhood.
All right, thank you. Does anyone wish to discuss any of the items on the consent agenda? If not, may we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Everyone in favor of accepting the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We'd like to thank those applicants whose projects were on the consent agenda for keeping our job easy, and we'll now move on to the regular agenda. The projects that remain are those that wish to be considered for exceptions to the guidelines, or are projects that the staff or members of the commission feel are of a magnitude that require review. Have the applicants been advised of any areas where the projects are not in compliance with the guidelines?
They have.
All right. So if we'll now have the introduction of the first case.
Item 1 on the regular agenda, just to call your attention to it, is in 2 parts. Only one item requires action today by the committee. The site plan review will require an action. The second part is a informational presentation regarding the building's design. It's to present the commission with a preliminary design of the building, as well as provide guidance to the applicant regarding the city center design guidelines. So, 823 Lady Street. This proposal is a request for site plan approval for construction of a new loft hotel. Currently, a vacant lot, the 69,000 square foot hotel building would front both Lady and Lincoln Street, with its primary entrance lobby and drop-off area along Lady Street. The hotel will contain a restaurant with a patio area off of the western edge of the building. And the majority of the parking will be provided by a 675 parking space parking garage that's operated by the City of Columbia currently. That's directly to the north of the site. The staff recommends approval with conditions. I'd like to call your attention to the following ones. The pedestrian connection from Lady Street sidewalk to the parking garage shall be provided. This connection shall continue across the rear of the building to the pedestrian entry of the parking garage, as well as continuing along to Lincoln Street. This portion of the connection from Lady Street to the parking garage shall have shade trees to provide shade to the walkway as well as the patio area. Materials and details and lighting of the pedestrian connection shall be similar to those used along Lady Street. An opportunity for public art shall be provided with the pedestrian connection from Lady Street sidewalk to the parking garage. And the design specifications within the right-of-way shall be coordinated with the urban design planner and the land development administrator through the encroachment process, and all further details to be deferred to staff. The applicant is here today, and I believe they have a presentation.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant come forward? At the podium and speak into the microphone, because technically the proceedings are recorded, and so we need basically everything that is presented to go onto the record.
Sure. Good afternoon. I am Raj Champaneri, and I'd like to introduce you to my partners, AJ Champaneri and Marcus Munce. We are excited to develop this first boutique hotel here in Columbia. It is a Starwood-affiliated brand. A loft is amongst the top in boutique hotels in the United States and many parts of the world. Typically, they are very successful in cities, downtown locations. I would like to show a little video about the brand itself, and maybe Craig, our architect, can come out and talk a little bit about it as well.
All right.
What am I? Okay, cool.
The first Aloft Hotel opened in Montreal in 2008, and with 70 hotels opened 5 years later, the new Aloft design scheme was launched. This video highlights the new Aloft interior design, from the brand core values, consumer psychographic, to the guiding principles and design inspiration. Sassy, savvy space are the Aloft core values: bold colors, modern design, and open spaces for socializing. The attitude is confident, creative, and eclectic. Aloft is about innovative technology.
Are we frozen,
I should blame John for it.
or is that the end? Is that the end of the?
The first Aloft Hotel opened in Montreal in 2008, and with 70 hotels opened 5 years later, the new Aloft design scheme was launched. This video highlights the new Aloft interior design, from the brand core values, consumer psychographic, to the guiding principles and design inspiration. Sassy, savvy space are the Aloft core values: bold colors, modern design, and open spaces for socializing. The attitude is confident, creative, and eclectic. Aloft is about innovative technology and urban sophistication in out-of-the-way locations. The Aloft consumer psychographic is the self-expressor. They are Gen Y and Gen Y attitude, the millennial or the silver surfer who acquires the latest smartphone or tablet and shares their life on social media. They are creative and confident with an eclectic style. Different by design means we bring a high-quality, sophisticated design experience to everyone at a good price. The design inspiration for new Aloft revolves around these themes. Digital culture. Our consumers live their lives digitally. They are the social media revolution, and as such, demand authenticity. Aloft is known for bold colors. However, for new Aloft, we wanted to apply vivid color a little more judiciously and to slightly mute the color palette. We look to fashion for our color inspiration. We hear a lot about personalization at Starwood, and even though Aloft has a prototypical design, we wanted to be thinking about how to personalize the design by offering options. We wanted to build some choices into the specifications so that every property has a little something different, but feels consistent with the brand aesthetic. Sustainability is a given. As designers, we must be thinking about and absolutely including it as part of the design process. As the Starwood interior design team, we mainly think about materials and human health, since this directly affects our guests. We also want to focus on choosing materials that have a high level of recycled content so that we are less reliant on virgin materials and fossil fuels. The Aloft consumer knows and recognizes authentic and iconic design, like an Eames chair designed for Herman Miller, a light fixture by George Nelson, or a Bertoya chair for Knoll. We are inspired by these iconic designs and want to make this available to everyone. We think of this as the democratization of design. The Aloft prototype architecture is distinct and iconic, with the roof swoop, speed stripe, exterior building lighting, and oversized Aloft signage. The Aloft prototype interior architecture is comprised of open, free-flowing space, exposed mechanical systems, concrete floors, and dropped-in wood ceiling systems that evoke a reclaimed loft space. For new Aloft, we have updated the interior finishes, furniture, and color palette. The reception desk is an iconic round desk with a backlit graphic, which changes seasonally. Refuel is Aloft's answer to grab and go. Made-to-order morning breakfast, light snacks, and make-your-own cappuccino. All graphics and menu boards are completely designed for an easy, turnkey solution. The Remix Lounge and WXYZ Bar are part of the open loft-like interior space that is signature to this brand. The openness of these spaces allows the energy to flow from one space to another and provides the limited staff an overall visual. The Recharge Fitness Area is a generous 600 square feet with high ceilings and large windows with a view to Splash and plenty of daylight. Bold graphic floors and walls are visually active. Splash can be either indoor or outdoor and features a colorful collection of furniture and surfboard artwork. Tactic, with flexible folding tables and stackable chairs, provides a meeting space for 10 to 15 people. The backyard features durable, all-weather social seating groups, sunshades, and planters that create a lively extension to WXYZ. The loft guest rooms have high ceilings and modular, built-in style furniture instead of walls. The headboard has integrated lighting, nightstands, and art, and doubles as a closet on the opposite side. The Bit Crush pixelated pattern is featured throughout the guest room and public spaces. The Aloft guest bathroom features a vanity which is open to the room and a sliding door to enclose the shower and toilet. This refreshed design direction for Aloft is to be used to guide all new build, conversion, and adaptive reuse projects. It can also be used for renovations, as it has been designed to work with the original Aloft design scheme. Every Aloft hotel should look and feel consistent to the brand while offering small touches of personalization and regional relevance. Following the process outlined in the Design Foundation document and Star Map allows Starwood's owners, developers, and other partners to create hotels that reflect Starwood's commitment to quality and to creating a better way to experience the world.
I'll let Craig talk a little bit about the architecture.
I'm Craig Alto. I'm the architect for the project. Thank you for having us and seeing us today. There you can get a good idea of what the exterior looks wants to look like. You saw a lot of the interior on that video presentation and tried to get a feel for what the hotel is all about. It's a very exciting project, not only in for the vista, but I think people will enjoy the property and the bar and the other lounge and things that they've got there. If you'd like, I'll just take you through the exterior materials briefly, if that's what you're looking for. Is that typically?
Do we need to talk about the site?
Basically, we've got two, if I understand this, there are two things that we're doing today. One is the site plan review and approval, and the second is an informational presentation on the building design. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct.
And so, and it's okay for y'all to present them in both, and I guess we'll break it up after the presentation in terms of in terms of what we discuss and how we ask questions. So largely what I think you're doing is more the informational on the building, but go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back after it's over and decide how to break it into a discussion for a vote.
Okay. Well, I'll make it brief so as not to bore you. The main material that you see is sort of a creamy gray color is brick veneer. So the majority of the exterior is brick. There are some horizontal precast bands at each floor level that are designed to sort of contrast with the brick a little bit, just a slightly different color and slightly different size material, the emphasis being on the horizontal. Those are precast stone. The corner feature is all aluminum panels that are, as you can see, sort of a dark color, charcoal type color. That extends not only for the upper 4 floors, but also much higher than the roof parapet wall to create a location for the large sign, which is backlit. What you can't see here is that the overhang over the top of the corner tower will have some uplighting such that the bottom of that soffit sort of glows in just a whitish color. You can see there's also some lighting along the bottom that is uplights. And I don't know if you can tell, but on that horizontal precast stone band, there are some LED lights that are intended to, that's one of the brand's prototype things, is there's some yellow lights and some purple lights, LEDs, along those horizontal bands, which again creates excitement and emphasis for the building. The first floor is almost at least on the presentation side, Lady and Lincoln, is a lot of glass, a lot of storefront. The main entrances are right there at the corner, one on Lady and one on Lincoln, with a nice view right into the lobby. Going down Lady Street, the next sets of glass you see into the Remix Lounge, and then the next opening is some outdoor seating that's under roof. It's under the building, but it's outdoors to the space, so that people can circulate directly from the lounge and the bar right out into this outdoor space. There's going to be a folding glass wall between the outdoor space and the bar so that they can open that up and let the music shine through. The last set of glass you see going down Lady Street is the what they call Tactic, which is the conference room, the boardroom. Guest rooms are on that back corner around on the first floor, and then there's guest rooms all on the second through fifth floors. There are no other public spaces above the first floor. Down on the bottom corner of Lady, as you go down the hill, there is a partial basement, approximately half the building. The back side of it is laundry and linen, and the front side and at the corner will be a restaurant, which they're working on getting a tenant for presently. And on the opposite side from what you can see here, on the left side of the building coming off of Lady Street will be a patio area for outdoor seating for the restaurant, which is what was referred to earlier for some landscaping and a pathway to the, there it is right there. Lady Street is running on the left there. So you go down the paved pathway and you can go around to the back and into the back parking garage, or you can, of course, there stop in the patio for dining and enter the restaurant right there. So that's basically the exterior. We have some sample materials should you want to look at them now or later. For the brick and the other stuff. One thing I did forget to point out, if you could go right back to that exterior, on the right side, which is the Lincoln Street side, there is one sort of a featured wall there that's a little different than the rest, that has the horizontal windows and the reddish brown color. That's cement board panels that are intended to be sort of for lack of a better word, an artsy wall presentation to the public as opposed to the materials on the rest of the building. And then the committee or the staff did suggest we do something with that blank brick wall at the end. We are proposing some additional horizontal recesses in that brick to create a little bit more interest in it. We can't cut, they had asked if we could potentially cut windows. We can't, unfortunately, because of the structural needs of that. That's a stair tower made out of concrete, and that's the one right at the bottom right. There's a stair tower right behind that. Our structural engineer just recently informed us that he needs those to be solid concrete with as few holes in them as possible to hold the building. So we're creating some horizontal lines in that brick, which we can present to you at some point in the near future.
Okay. I guess as I looked over the project and in relation to the guidelines, there were two areas that I'd like to see some clarification or development on as it goes forward. One is how the building addresses the street. I recognize that there's pretty much a full story drop from Lincoln down to the left, but it doesn't, the building doesn't really connect, and the rendering, I think, shows this, the building doesn't really connect to the street. I mean, there's not, there's one door up here at the top and one door to the restaurant space at the bottom. But I feel like particularly at the lower level where the restaurant is, there's an opportunity to bring some more connectivity and life to the Lady Street side along the street so that the building has more of a clear sense of being a street front urban building that effectively addresses the street itself. If you look at this facade, you've 2/3 of the building, if you're walking around and you've got eye level at 5 foot, per normal person, the middle 2/3 of the building basically is a solid foundation wall. And so as you're walking by at the street level, the building doesn't really have a sense of being connected to the street, which is one of the primary focuses in the guidelines for this neighborhood, talks about percentage of glazing at the street. I recognize the hill makes that a complicated issue, but I feel like that the building doesn't really address that issue from the guideline standpoint as I interpret the guidelines. I sense that there's this plinth, and again, the middle 2/3 of the building basically as a solid mass instead of something that connects to Lady Street. And even down at the restaurant level where you've got a lot of activity in the courtyard, you don't have any real activity on the Lady Street side. So I feel like in terms of my interpretation of the guidelines, I feel like that's a window that needs to be addressed. The other issue or concern that I would have regarding the architecture is it's how the detailing comes off. I mean, how it's a very clean, simple, somewhat stark design, which I think is a loft's design philosophy, and I don't think that's at all inappropriate. But I think the key to it being successful will be in the execution of those details. We've had some projects that were reviewed and approved that, in execution simply did not come out in a clean, neat, crisp way. And so I think we'd like to see a lot of emphasis on how those details work, how the reveals with the lights work, how the grills under the mechanical units, exactly what they look like, how the joints come together, because if it's done with a great deal of finesse, then I guess it could be fine, but if it's not done with a great deal of finesse, it could be very much a suburban hotel with just a really plain facade and not much detail. So I feel like from a massing and proportion standpoint, it's one of our guidelines talks about massing, and I think there's some leeway on Lady Street. We have a very mixed context, but I mean, there's a lot in the guidelines about how the building is broken up in massing and elements. There's a 4/5 of this is a large horizontal mass with very little vertical articulation. There's not much in the neighborhood that would have those proportions. And so if you're looking at the guidelines where it talks about matching the proportions of other buildings in the neighborhood, this is a very horizontal building in comparison to the neighborhood standards. So I'm not sure that I'm completely comfortable at this point with the articulation of the massing along Lady Street and the complete horizontal nature of it in terms of how that relates to the guideline requirements for massing that's, proportionate and rhythmic related to other buildings in the neighborhood. So those would be my issues. I think other commissioners, again, where we are for the building at this month is informational and giving you comments so that, when you come back next month or in the future, you'll have a chance to incorporate those. The basic fundamental site plan, I feel like probably does largely meet the intent of the neighborhood guidelines. Certainly this is a site that was set aside in front of the parking garage to be a building. That's appropriate. The site issues would come back to making sure that particularly on the left side of the building, that pedestrian pathway integrates to the other pedestrian pathway across the street that comes in between the new Hyatt Place Hotel and the existing arts building there, and provides a pedestrian way through. But that would be my only site plan comment. Again, other commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, if I can ask a question. There's an enormous power pole that's immediately in front of the building. What is the setback around that, and how are you going to address it?
Well, we made it easier on ourselves and we're going to have SC&G move the pole.
Really?
Yeah. There's actually going to move one pole and add two. So there's going to be one up here at the corner of Lady and Lincoln, farther away from the property line than it is now, and then one down at the bottom end, essentially right in front of the corner of our property there. And they'll be out in the right-of-way.
Will the neighbors have an opportunity to respond to that?
I'm not sure. I don't think it affects the neighbors, honestly. It's just moving it, I don't know how many feet, 10, 15 feet away from our property line.
Okay. Fascinating. All right.
Yeah.
The only other question in terms of site specifics that I had was really the circulation around the building, and I think that's being addressed in terms of the additional sidewalk on the parking garage side and then the connectivity around the back. I think as our chairman pointed out, it does meet the guidelines in terms of how it addresses the adjacency of the public right-of-way. So I don't believe I have a concern about the site, but I am surprised that you can move that power line.
Well, it costs money, but they can be done. It would have required, had the pole stayed where it is, it would have required quite a setback on the upper floors of the building, which would have made the property less desirable to use.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just in relation to the polls, and if you've now worked with SCE&G, there's a tremendous process or interest afoot in the city of doing undergrounding of electrical wires and so on. And if you have you discussed with SCE&G the possibility?
The power lines have been discussed at multiple city departments, and those are they're not local lines. So local lines you can actually bury, but those high level lines you can't actually bury. So and as you know, on the opposite corner is a substation. So the power has to leave the substation, get to the substation. That substation provides power to a lot of the downtown larger developments. So the power has to come up towards the river to that spot. So we will never, so to speak, unless the technology advances that you can bury those, there's always going to be that power line. The power line does move closer to the center of the street. So it does, as they realign some of these poles, the development issues that they have incurred, they won't have anymore. So they have worked it out. I even believe you've had engineering drawings for, SC&G has actually gone to that point of preparing the drawings and giving you a quote for the price and everything. So they're pretty far ahead in the process of the power lines.
Very good.
If I add to that conversation, is it our purview to review where those power lines go if it is our purview to review the site plan of this property?
Mostly your purview is actually in the public right-of-way and the individual property. In terms of the power poles, it's really SC&G. So there's very limited locations where the poles can and can't go. So there will be the pole will move to basically the planting island near the intersection of Lincoln and Lady, and then there's a modification of the pole, I believe, to the east and a modification towards the west in terms of how they align. But they're going to end up essentially where there are planting beds at the moment. So
and street lights and other things.
it would avoid all of those. They've worked out that it would avoid those items. And right now, where the poles are, they actually kind of interrupt the sidewalk. So if anything, as a pedestrian, those poles are going to be more hidden within the vegetated areas. So from eye level, I think they'd be a little less obtrusive, but.
My apologies for interrupting.
No, that's fine. I do have one more question about the exterior lighting of the signage and so on. You say we can see here that some of it is up lighting and then there's down lighting. certainly in the Vista area. We've had some other applications that needed to be discussed in full. Can you just describe again the degree of lighting and how it will affect the other neighbors, if you will?
Well, most of the lighting that you see here is really focused on the building itself, so it's not really intended to light the sidewalk or anything like that. The strip lights, the yellow and purple strip lights, create really more of a glow than illumination, light, shining out. So those should not affect the neighbors at all, other than that they'll be able to see them, but they won't be shining in. And then the uplights near the bottom that shine up onto the wall are intended just to create an excitement of the building. We haven't really addressed whether we're putting some lights along the face of the building that would light the sidewalk. Honestly, we just haven't addressed that yet. So I can't answer that question yet. You can also see that the covered canopies that enter off of Lady and Lincoln both have uplighting and the colorful bottom, the ceiling of those, which is an Aloft brand sort of iconic feature there. Those are uplit so that they stay nice and bright. There'll be some lighting that, of course, bleeds out of through the glass onto the sidewalk to give some illumination to the sidewalk. But again, we haven't really addressed sidewalk lighting, if that's part of your question. The signage is all interior lighting, backlit, and it's white, as you can see, and you can see it from a distance, but it certainly doesn't shine out and shine anybody's neighbors. I'm not sure if I answered your question adequately, but
Yeah.
yes, sir. Thank you.
I had a question as well.
Can I?
Go ahead, sorry.
Let me confirm, this is the city center, the guidelines that apply are our city center guidelines?
Correct. It's a city center guidelines. And just also to note, the signage, we have not seen a formal package. We just see the one rendering. In the city center, we will have to have conversations with the applicant about the backlit lights, because we don't have standard backlit light allowed in the city, in the city center area. But usually the lighting of the signage and the sign is handled at the staff level. So we have not had that conversation yet.
Before I turn the forum back over to Ashby, my comments before, if you'll look at section 5.3.2 of the city center guidelines, specifically address facade proportion and rhythm, and that would be, before you come back with the final presentation on the design, I'd ask that you pay particular attention to the provisions in that section as it relates to the massing of the building, what I address in a more general term, the horizontal nature of the building. I think there are some specific language in the guidelines at 5.3.2 that talk about facade proportion and rhythm as it relates to the neighborhood. So I'd ask you to give that some consideration before coming back for the final, as well as their specific guidelines addressing the street facades and storefront openings in the city center guidelines. If you would, again, give some specific attention to those sections, before coming back with the final design presentation.
Can I just follow up with that? And the rendering, this is the first time the rendering's been presented, was today. That darker precast band that runs through actually kind of adds to the horizontalness of the project, and I'm not sure how the applicant would feel about this, but if it was a precast that was more similar to the color of the brick, it would have more of an accent of a horizontal, but it wouldn't have that pop. It might actually draw less attention and actually seem more vertical and similar to the surrounding buildings than
I think it might. I think I have a concern. While I think from a site planning standpoint, it's perfectly appropriate for it to be a building that occupies the entire site and fills it out. From a facade rendering standpoint, the precedent in the neighborhood is not for full block horizontal masses. I can't actually think of a single historic precedent in the neighborhood that would be a full block horizontal mass. And so I wonder if in terms of addressing the intent of the guidelines, something that maybe had some vertical divisions or something that broke the facade rhythm up into things that were more proportional to the other masses along the neighborhood, I think would be one of my concerns. I'll turn it back over to you. I was just putting a specific section on what I talked to earlier.
Very good comments, I think. Craig, certainly an exciting building.
Thank
So
you. Yes.
congratulations on that. I just had some general questions, maybe pretty easy to answer. The height requirements, I'm assuming that we're well within whatever height restrictions might be in that area.
Yes, we had a minor modification to the PUD approved a couple of weeks or a week ago, which increased the height just slightly, 3 feet. The average height of this building is just under the maximum. The height is supposed to be 66 feet. The building average, as you know, it's shorter on one end than on the other, is about 65 feet 3 or 4 inches. So it's just under it in terms of the average height.
Okay. As long as it, falls within the guidelines there.
Yes, sir.
It's good.
The guidelines are pretty much just say 66 feet, but it doesn't really take into consideration the slope and the grade. So we took an average of I think I put it, the tape at 8 different locations and took the average of that, and it was under 66 feet. Yes, sir.
Okay. What about I was curious about does it have a pool? We saw some pools in the video, again, pretty exciting. I didn't know what the pool plans were, whether it was inside, outside, or whatever. And also the service entry for this. How do you handle that? That's always a mess, in my opinion.
That's fine. We actually don't have a pool. We had originally proposed a pool. The backyard area where the pool was going to go got a little smaller as the design progressed. And so we're turning that backyard area into a courtyard, or what they refer to in a loft likes to call it a backyard, with the fire pit and the outdoor seating. We're trying to make, we haven't really designed that space entirely, but we want that space to be a fun, exciting place to go that also opens up directly from the bar. So you would be able to go in and out of there from the lounge and the bar and enjoy the outdoors along with the indoors. It should hopefully be sort of a free-flowing space. But there is no pool. And as far as the service entrance, the hotel for linens, laundry, and all that has a service entrance in the back off the driveway between the parking garage and the building. You'll go down some stairs to go into a back door. The laundry's at the basement level, and then that laundry has access to an elevator that'll go up to all the floors. The restaurant will also have a separate service entrance on the back left corner. It's on the rear side of the building, again, between the building and the parking garage. Down on that end of the driveway, which is the top of the page on the way it's oriented here, is a dumpster pad and a couple of parking spots for loading and unloading for food and other services for the restaurant. So the pathway that goes through there will cross that driveway and meander down the sidewalk and out that to Lady Street.
So the service is off of the two main, it is not visible from the two main streets.
So,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just in relation to that same point here, is the service street contiguous to the garage area behind? Is that going to be a private thoroughfare, or is that public?
If I'm not mistaken, it's on the property owners, our property, but it's an easement, of course, so the driveway will remain, and it is the access in and out of the parking garage. You essentially go about halfway down the driveway and turn right into the parking garage. Or I don't know if you come out of that end of the parking garage too, I just don't recall right now. But once you get past that driveway that goes into the parking garage, then it's semi-private in that it's a dead end, it's a dumpster location, it's a service truck location. So I don't think anybody is going to have any reason to drive past the entrance into the parking garage into our area back there in the back.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Also on the rendering of the exterior facade, flip over to that. Just had a question about it. It looks like, again, you've got through the wall, underneath the window units, and for some, but not for others. So is this like a suite hotel? I was just curious.
No, there's actually 2 windows in each guest room. There's essentially one in each corner of the room. One has an air conditioning unit, one does not in that room.
Okay.
So and the louvers are going to be flush with the exterior wall flush with the windows, and sort of integrated in with the windows.
Is that more of the prototypical solution, or did you consider making them all look the same so that you have a kind of a constant rhythm going left to right there? I mean, I guess I find it a little bit odd that some have it and some don't.
Well, there's a pattern in that there's a pair of them that have it, and the next pair don't, the next
Right.
pair does, the next pair doesn't.
May I?
Sure.
Yeah, it is prototypical because from the inside, there's a case good that's manufactured where one end of it sits as a desk and the other end is where the P-TEC goes in. So it has to be a P-TEC based on that encasement that goes around the window from the inside of the room.
So, no, there wasn't really given any consideration to matching all of that up and putting what would essentially be artificial louvers under there. We just felt like that it was more appropriate just to have the brick material run underneath it.
Okay.
Mr. Gressett, the applicant, early in the discussions, they did show us two options. This particular one where the HVAC unit's integrated into the window system. The other one is where they have the window and then they have the pack that comes up and then it's surrounded by the brick, so it's this object stuck there. And this rendering might not do it, but they had photographs of it, and it did seem much more elegant than your standard punched opening through the brick area. And maybe they could bring those pictures next time to see those up-close details.
Okay. And the air conditioning unit sits entirely within the room, so it's not sticking out of the room, out of the building.
Okay.
So it's all flush.
And you addressed, or you talked a little bit about, again, on the video, it had some pretty exciting lighting at night. And you would have pretty much all of that, 80% of what we saw in the video, or?
If you remember on the video, there was, at the roof level, there was some colored strips like we have underneath the canopy entrances.
Right.
Those were up on the roof. They call that the swoof. And we do not have the swoof like many of the lofts. Not all of them do. A good many of them do, but not all of them. And we elected for this design, and this will not have the colors up there like a lot that you saw in the video. This will have just a aluminum color or white, probably aluminum color, clear aluminum.
If I may, I spoke earlier about the site considerations. In terms of the design, I think our chairman spoke pretty well to how significant a deviation this monolithic building would be from what the guidelines say. So rather than addressing windows and mullion details, let me just point you back to the guidelines in terms of the massing matching this area of the vista. I did have a question about the rooftop bar. It seems like the best view from this hotel is walled off. Is there any way to open that up?
We have since eliminated the rooftop bar. There is no rooftop bar.
Gotcha.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I forgot that we had that previously.
Flow into the patio from the main level.
We felt like that with the interior bar on the first floor and the outdoor seating on Lady Street and the backyard, courtyard, all being able to free flow, that we were kind of being redundant with putting it on the roof. And our experience says that most folks don't go all the way up to the roof when there's good activity going on at the first floor. It was kind of a nice, cool concept that just hasn't really panned out.
Other questions or comments from the commissioners? All right, at this time, we're going to give the audience a chance to present comments, and then you will have a chance to come back up and address any comments or questions that come up out of the audience comments. So if anyone would like to speak about the project, please come forward. Good afternoon. Were you here to be signed in?
I have not signed in.
Okay.
I'm Guy Jones, and I own a building that's close by. I have to say we're very excited about this project. I drove to Asheville over the weekend to look at the Aloft Hotel there, and found it really very compelling. So one thing that I noticed there was that it incorporated retail on the first floor. They utilized the lobby on the second floor to help allow that space. It would be great if we had retail in this project. And I would like to mirror the comments about the way the building addresses Lady Street. It would be nice if there were a little bit better addressing of Lady Street and toward the left of the building. And the last comment I have is in the construction of this building, I just hope that we will see a really high-quality product and a building that will look very much like the one in Nashville. And it'll be a great project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak regarding this project? All right. Any other commissions, comments, or questions? Again, this month we are voting on the site plan approval only, and basically the building design was here for informational purposes and will come back either next month or in a future month. But so in terms of the site plan approval, that was the first package that was in our package, and I believe that there were some staff comments on each of the departments had a chance to present any staff comments. Has the applicant agreed to all of the comments that were staff comments in the site plan review?
I believe they have. Yes.
Okay, so basically, if we were to move a vote based on the site plan with the comments per the staff comments, that would be the appropriate motion.
Unless you, of course,
Unless
like to add anything.
Unless there are additional comments that the commission wants to add. Again, I think I'm trying to decide. My comment or concern regarding how the building addresses the street, is that something that is a more appropriate comment for a site plan comment or a more appropriate comment when the building comes back in for a building review from a staff evaluation standpoint? Where should that best fall?
I guess it could certainly apply to both. It would maybe a little more specific information on what you had in mind.
Okay,
by addressing the street.
there are two specific things that I feel like the building needs to do in terms of complying with the guidelines as I understand them that have some relation to site. One is that there be more effort paid to provide storefront or connectivity at the actual sidewalk level along Lady Street for a larger extent of the building. And the second would be additional development in the pedestrian pathway around the left side and back of the building. Those are two areas that I think need to show more development than I currently see in the drawings.
I guess, if you'd like to see more, we can ask, you can certainly ask the applicant for more, and we can defer if necessary, if it comes to that, or we can, if you're comfortable with us working with them to get that development to you, we could certainly do that and address
I
it
think
next
from
month.
a site plan standpoint, I would be comfortable with that as a comment asking the applicant to, because the Lady Street one will also have to be addressed when it comes back in for a building review, but primarily the landscape development around the left side, I'm comfortable with the idea of a motion that approves the project, but ask as details are developed that more detail be developed in the landscape massing around the left side connectivity, left side connection of the building, and then we'll have a chance to review the Lady Street facade when the building comes back in.
Are you asking for that additional information to be dealt with at the staff level, or for site plan approval subject to all of the details of that pedestrian walkway coming back to the commission?
No, I think I would be comfortable for the details of that pedestrian walkway being dealt with at the staff level, provided just with a comment that additional detail beyond what we're currently seeing be dealt with on the pedestrian walkway. And I really think probably the Lady Street comment can be, because we will get a chance to review it at the building, that probably could just be left off of a motion at this point and be part of the building design review. So the only thing I would like to see in a motion, and again, they're going to need one of y'all to probably make a motion, would be if it's something you're consistent with, is is additional development on the landscaping plan on the pedestrian pathway around the left side of the building be integrated into the project and details be deferred to staff. So it's,
Mr. Chairman, I would also ask, I'm noting here in the presentation that we've had, that the roof-mounted utility equipment is not shown, and at this point is not, in the design process. No details have been presented, I understand, up to this point. I would hope that we would see those brought forth as well and/or determined by staff as we move forward.
okay. Yeah, in light of the fact that we're seeing mechanical units on top of the hotel across the street that I don't recall seeing on the plans, I think that's a good idea.
Correct.
Okay, does a commission member want to attempt a motion that perhaps incorporates both of those things? When do you want to try to make a motion that maybe incorporates both of those things into the motion?
The HVAC system would be something that would come with the design review, not the site plan
Okay,
review.
so that can be
you
held
can
off.
save that for,
We can
and
save that
I'm
for
sure they have a month to work on getting details for you.
All right, so perhaps a motion then that just addresses the additional landscaping detail along the left side.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion here that the site approval or request for certificate of site plan approval for 823 Lady Street by virtue of city center design guide and development district guidelines be approved with the proviso that the streetscape connectivity along the left side and along the Lady Street slope area be worked out with staff to be more appropriate to guidelines.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Does that motion include all staff comments?
Yeah,
Including staff comments, correct.
okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion of the motion? So basically, the motion as it's written would be to grant a certificate of design approval for site work, including all staff comments with the additional comment that additional landscaping development and detail be developed along the Lady Street front and left side of the property. Is that a fair recounting of your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And do the comments listed include deferral of additional work to staff on this matter? It is one of the conditions?
It was
So
one
that
of
is
the conditions,
included in the
yes.
motion? Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second and some discussion. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Question, Mr. Chairman. You had, so what my understanding of the motion was that it's dealing with that pedestrian walkway on the private property going from the Lady Street sidewalk to the parking garage area. There were some comments earlier on about other elements in that area. Is that to include that conversation, or?
Yes.
And if so, you could amend the motion, but I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that all those comments that were originally discussed are either in or out of the motion.
Okay, so I mean, as I understand the motion, the motion would include the entire pedestrian pathway on the private property around the left side and to the back of the building, connectivity-wise, and it also would dealing with the building placement design as it relates to Lady Street from a pedestrian level at the lower end of the building.
Correct.
And so that, I think, is the motion as everyone understands it. So we have that motion and a second. At this point, I think we are,
You're in the middle of a motion, so
yeah,
you
we're
need
in
to
the middle of a
finish that.
motion, and it's only the commission that would vote on that. So I think that probably not at this point. We probably are outside of discussion point. Any other discussion among the commission? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. The other aspects of the building for informational purposes, there will be no vote. I mean, you've basically heard our comments. Y'all have the opportunity to come back as, as you wish. You can ignore our comments at your own peril, or you can come back with revisions that reflect your interpretation of how to best address those issues. And if if there's some level of, if you find yourself going back and having a difficult time deciphering, and you could certainly contact staff and try to work through it with them. If at some point there becomes an issue, we have also done some design charrettes where we will sit down on an informal basis and try to talk through things if you don't feel like you're getting sufficient answers from staff regarding those comments. All right, let's move on to the next project. Okay, no problem. That's all right. We're shifting staff people at the table anyway, so it's
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, the next case under the historic agenda is 711 Gervais Street. This is a Bailey Bill project that came before y'all some time ago, and there have just been some developments in the project that were enough that staff felt that we should just show you what was going on, make sure y'all were good with it. Mr. Garvin, the architect, is here. I think actually he's probably a better person to talk about the project. Surprise.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure I'm more qualified than you are, but I'll try.
Okay, well, I just put up the original rendering and the newer ones.
Okay. Yeah, this is what we brought to you in the very beginning. And as you know, with 1860s warehouses, you never really know what you're going to find until you start peeling back the layers. The two surprises were the center building, which is 707. We had hoped and thought that some of that gable was there. In the 1940s and 50s, they connected the middle building in 711 and built a new facade across the front of it. We were hoping that part of that gable was there. Actually, none of it was, and had a lot of conversations with Amy about alternative strategies. But Amy was very convincing, and we basically rebuilt that facade to be similar to the original gable. And if you drive by, you can see that that's happening right now. So we're still basically complying with what was approved for that middle building. On the 711 building, again, a new facade was built over the old facade, and we discovered remnants, pieces, and parts of the original windows, and they were actually sandwiched in between the two brick walls. There was a upper sash of one of the windows, a bottom sash of one of the windows, and a piece of a door that had been installed inside of it. So we felt like that was actually a pretty cool discovery. And so instead of having the two open bays like we had in the previous design, we're going to replace those original windows with historically appropriate windows to match them, and just leave the bay to the right open, and that'll be the patio for the restaurant. So that's the most significant change. And we've continued to do lots of demo. We've separated the two buildings now, which is what you see in that rendering. So that pedestrian alley between 707 and 711 is now there. So lots of other surprises, but nothing that's changed the design intent.
It's very exciting to see all the detail that's becoming clear as those buildings have been sort of emptied out and the demolition has taken place. So it's a really unique space that only historic buildings could really accomplish. That's emerging.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool.
It's very cool. I have no comments. Is there any comment? We will, but we have to go through the comment and audience participation process first. That's formal requirements. Are there any comments from commissioners? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak regarding this project? In that case, we can now have a motion for approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we approve the project 707 through 711 Gervais Street as presented with its revised set of circumstances and according to staff's recommendations.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and seconds. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
All right, next case.
The next case on the agenda is 1230 Sumter Street, and this is another Bailey Bill project that came before you. This one actually came last month. You'll recognize the Keenan building, which was slip covered, and Mr. Patel is in the process of removing that slip cover and hopefully taking it back to some of the original configurations of the building. So much of it, as you know, is missing. He was hoping to go back with some terracotta, but we've run into some issues around the terracotta. And a new product, which is a polyurethane product, has been proposed, and he's got a sample here, which I'll pass to y'all. It has very clean lines. Apparently, they can duplicate just about any feature that you need as long as you have accurate dimensions. But because we're going back with a substitute material on a building where we're replacing a fair amount of it, I needed to get y'all's approval for that. We typically go back with original materials, but there are some extenuating circumstances potentially here. And of course, we haven't used this before that I know of in the city, so staff is viewing it more as a test case to see how it does and how well it wears. And of course, approval that would certainly be conditional upon it being used only on the upper reaches, where changes from synthetic materials or differences between synthetic materials and original materials are really not obvious. So this has been approved in other projects across the state. So I just want to pass it around though so y'all can feel
What
it.
finish are you looking to use on it, or is the what finish is the?
We were talking about that earlier. We would just want to duplicate the finish of a terracotta as closely as we could. And, you know, you can do apparently almost anything in terms of finishes to this material. They do like an ultraviolet sort of finish on the base material before they send it out. So it's baked in, so
So there would be a factory-applied finish first, and then touch-ups or whatever after application.
Right.
Okay.
And Amy, before you get away from the microphone, or perhaps when you come back, we're talking about the upper reaches, meaning from the 5th floor up?
Right, that's correct. Anything that would be storefront, I would say, you know, any sills, storefront, anything below that, really, we probably ought to stick with mostly original materials. It's going to be most important on storefront where people can actually reach out and touch something. If you touch this, you can tell it's not terracotta.
So you're actually saying from the 2nd floor up, this would be considered
This material?
this material?
I don't think we're going to have any of this material on the sills. There's a granite veneer that can be used on the sills that they're proposing to use. So that'll be in conformity with our guidelines. I would say,
It's really just the top floor and the
Yeah.
cornice detail above the
That's
top.
what
I
I'm
think
asking.
So it
so.
would include the cornice beneath the 6th floor windows, because that's been chipped away as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also the entablature above
That-
the 6th floor windows.
Right.
And probably the balustrade.
And the balustrade, yeah. There are a couple of pieces missing there, maybe about a dozen, I think we counted. And so they would probably go back and reconstruct with this on those missing
Whose
pieces.
brand is this? Is it Vipon, or is it whose?
The company is called Architectural Elements. They're out of the Northeast. So, and I think most of what I gave y'all were projects they've done some National Register, some other up in the
I-
Northeast.
I've used the product on new construction projects before, cornices where you've got a multi-part cornice. We've done it with the
Well, it
main-
helps that it's, 70 feet in the air.
Right.
But it's real important, I think, the finish and the color.
Yeah, I think that's.
And make every attempt to keep it from looking plastic.
That's right. That's a major consideration. So. According to the architectural elements owner, it weathers quite well. I haven't actually, they sent some information today about long-term projects that they've used it on, so I'll be looking at that.
We've used it on new construction. I mean, it's not an inexpensive product. It's probably less expensive than terracotta, but it's not an inexpensive product at all, and you don't have the weight issues.
It feels very dense where the foam, if you will, part is, which is reassuring.
Yeah, it does hold up. I mean, we've got some 15, 18-year-old projects. They were more of a painted finish, so we weren't really trying to match a terracotta look. But in terms of, it's not a material that rots. So I mean, it does hold up, and we've used it in lieu of wood typically because it doesn't.
And holds up against wind and storm?
Yeah, it's anchored and attached. I mean, a lot of that is construction, but if it's anchored and attached, I think it's probably got the same, same strength in terms of blowing off the building as the terracotta would. It's just as good as how it's put on and attached.
I would imagine those seams where the materials meet are really important to get those right.
I think that what Ashby's talked about in terms of getting the finish to match the other terracotta on the building will be the critical component as to whether it reads successfully or not. It is clearly out of, you can't touch it, and it's 45 feet in the air. But in light of, the fact that the existing original material simply isn't there to restore, I mean, I do think our guidelines allow some flexibility. And you've got a situation, you're not taking off or destroying historic material. Somebody did that 45 years ago when they clad the building with the other skin. And so it's a little late to have that argument.
May I ask the question, if, assuming this is used, one of the reasons it would be used is because it can be anchored in a different fashion, is the intent to leave the existing demolished to a certain degree material behind it, so that if this was ever taken off, let me rephrase that, is there any additional demolition needed in order to install this?
There may be some needed where it meets where there are little pieces of terracotta left. I would imagine you'd have to clean that up to get those seams right. As far as behind where this is going to go, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm Rick Patel, one of the owners of the property.
Okay.
Wherever the joints are, where the beams are connected, so we're going to have to go to the finished spot, grind down the concrete flush, so the new material will land flush against the existing material, and then they'll be siliconed.
If you look at the pictures in the packets, I'm sure you noticed how destroyed that material. I mean, there's not anything to save there, unless you have some experience you can offer us on this.
Not at all. My question was whether they would have to take down a good bit of the masonry in order to install this, or whether it was going to stay more or less as is and just be covering up that. And it sounds like you're doing the best you can to preserve what
The concrete patch that they put on there is they did that for weatherproofing.
Yeah.
So that will have to be smoothed out.
Yep. Thank you.
But in the case where we've got that part gets preserved, but then the part that's above that gets taken out, so. but you would be saving these pieces that are original. Okay, so.
And if you could just repeat that for the
So
record.
basically, we were looking at a photograph of the existing condition that was in our package and identifying that where there is existing material, it will be retained. They will create a clean joint where the material has been busted away, beams and other elements, create a clean joint, do an infill so that largely there's not existing terracotta that's being taken off. There will have to be some of the concrete patch material and other things that was done that is taken off. So, okay.
Did we discuss all the first floor, or is that off the table? I mean, is that, what material is there? Concrete.
There's some concrete down there, and of course, the configuration has changed a good bit. We haven't really gotten to discussing a whole lot about the first floor as yet, but where there's original material, we're going to keep it and reproduce it.
All right. Okay, any other commission questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak regarding this project? All right, so,
Can I just
Sure.
another question?
Sure.
The more historic part. I don't know.
no. Well,
Okay, the 1925 part is the part that we're discussing. What happens to the 1950 addition? But isn't it under sort of the same demolition right now?
It is.
So does it follow this, or is it under the same guidelines, or what happens with
Yeah,
the 1950s edition?
it follows the same guidelines, so we'll be going back with original materials where we can. Of course, this building is much easier because the lines are so clean that generally we haven't really even talked about it because we're assuming that one's going to be so much easier than everything else, but the same guidelines apply.
yeah, basically, we have previously approved the entire building under the Bailey bill as well as a certificate of design approval for the work being proposed. And this is simply coming back with a request to revise our previous approval only as it relates to substituting this material at the cornice level. So what this motion, if it's made and approved, would do would only change for the allowance of this material as a substitution at the cornice. All of our previous approval for the project would still be unchanged.
That's correct.
All right. And we want to note in the motion that this is being done on an experimental basis based on this particular circumstances of this project.
Right, and the other conditions that are listed, I felt like those were important to note as the exception for the synthetic material.
So under the staff recommendations, basically, whoever crafts the motion might want to look carefully at the staff recommendation. Do I have would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll give it a shot. Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we accept and approve the request for changes to this Bailey Bill project based on the material presented and under the fact that it's somewhat of a, what did you describe it as?
Test case.
Test case that to utilize this material, considering its height on the building and considering the staff recommendations.
Okay. We have a motion.
Second?
There's a second. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right. I think that concludes our regular case agenda. Is there any other, I think there was a memo regarding elections that we postpone elections until the next meeting based on some absences at this meeting. Is that something that everyone is comfortable with? I don't know that has to, okay, make that a motion. That way it'll be on the.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we postpone the election of new positions, chairman, et cetera, until next month due to absences at this meeting.
Thank you. Second. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We have January minutes. Are there any comments on January minutes? Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Okay, motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.